This day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. I want to take a moment to tell you about a podcast from the Shalom Hartman Institute called Identity Crisis. This podcast is creating better conversations about the essential issues facing Jewish life. It's hosted by Yehuda Kurtzer, president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, who sits down with a wide range of guests, politicians, authors, writers, and more to discuss current events, Jewish values, and the big questions facing Jewish life. This podcast has a genuine curiosity and humility about the critical and complex issues, everything from what it means to be a Jewish leader during this divisive moment to the experience of being a Palestinian in Israel today. You will find Identity Crisis enriching and enlivening. Check it out, Identity/Crisis with Yehuda Kurtzer, wherever you get your podcasts. Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, May 1904, the Butter Wars reach the United States Supreme Court. That is right, we are diving right into the 100-year history of the battle between butter and margarine, which did indeed reach the highest court in the land. This is the story of a newish product, margarine, going up against a very well-established and traditional and very well-connected industry, butter and the dairy lobby. It goes all the way back to the 1870s, which I will confess really surprised me, a lot earlier than maybe I expected margarine to be on the scene. Of course, this war extends well into our lifetimes. I think we kind of saw peak margarine in the 1980s and 1990s or so, then a shift back to butter in this century. But let's get into it. Here to spread the margarine of history all over the toast of our brains. No? Sounded good when I was writing it. You want me to repeat it to make it really
burn
land?
It into our toast
Here
brains.
to spread the margin of history all over the toast of our brains is, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
This is our Butter Battle episode.
Butter Battle. That's good. Maybe that. Let's make that the title.
We're stealing it from Dr. Zeus.
Oh, yeah.
The Butter Battle book.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Well, let's ask the most important question. What exactly is margarine?
This is a very good question. I think Kellie and I both grew up on margarine, which isn't surprising because we're 80s babies, but it is a little surprising because my mom grew up on a farm. She grew up making her own butter. And by the time my brother and I came along, she was like, let's get the science stuff. We were very better living through chemistry kind of household. Yeah, and that's basically what margarine is. Better butter through chemistry, or cheaper butter, I guess, is what we would say. Butter, very basic, churned milk. If you have some butter in your refrigerator, you can pour it into a bowl, get out your hand mixer. It'll eventually turn into whipped cream, keep going. It'll eventually, after that, turn into butter. Margarine, on the other hand, is emulsified oils. Which doesn't sound as good as churned milk. But it just means like blended oils, right? It used to be animal fats turned into oil. Nowadays, it's almost exclusively plant oils. It's the same as butter in the sense that they're both 80% fat and 20% butter. It's different in that butter comes from a cow and is a much older product, but it comes onto the scene in the 1870s because it's cheaper. Butter is really expensive. There's tons of new migrants coming to the United States. There's a lot of poverty in the United States, and the invention of margarine puts onto the market a product that more people can afford. And so by 1882, New York State was producing 20 million pounds of margarine every single year, which is pretty impressive.
But I will say, I understand that in order to emulsify oils and get them to bond and create this sort of oily spread, you need some chemistry involved. But I think I maybe thought margarine was much more a sort of pure product of chemistry than maybe what it actually is. I mean, it does come from natural ingredients. I sound like chemistry,
Wow.
DuPont lobbyist.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Like, it's not made out of petroleum, right? Like, it's not like a
Yeah.
1950s product, although that is when it comes back into to popularity. But yeah, no, it's natural. It's fine. We can call it all natural margarine.
And we'll get into some of the rules about it needing a percentage of milk, which is important as well here. Obviously, cheaper, which is a big part of this story. Also, if you're vegan, vegetarian, this is where you get your butter substitute. Margarine also has a higher smoke point, I think, and is better for certain kinds of baking and cooking.
And it's softer, right? Like you can spread it easier, even if it's cold, which is
you can put it in a tub.
Yes, which is ideal. There's nothing like having hard butter that won't spread over toast.
Bane of my existence.
Yeah, I know. I know, it really is.
Yeah. So I guess let's talk a little bit about why this is seen as such a threat to the dairy industry, to big butter. And I guess my first question is, why was it seen that way? If, some of these ingredients also come from the same farms that are producing butter. I think some margarines are made with like kind of the leftover oils from the process of making butter. I guess I'm a little surprised that there was such huge pushback when you could have maybe seen a world in which the butter industry like co-opts the margarine industry and doesn't see it as a threat, instead sees it as an alternate product. That is not what happened. They went hard.
No, they went very hard. I mean, listen, anytime you undercut somebody's economic bottom line, they are going to come after you. And that's where these butter battles really engage and really pick up. So the butter industry starts to basically destroy sort of the image and the idea of margarine by having these political cartoonists that will depict margarine factories, and they're showing like everything is being dumped in as an ingredient, like paint and arsenic and soap and rubber boots and stray cats. I'm like, stray cats?
Look, it's not that far from the jungle, which is, 25 years in the future, but
it's like, and they're trying to show you like, you don't want this. This is junk. This is trash. And then it goes even further to be like, you know what? We think margarine might cause cancer. You know what? We think margarine leads to insanity. And there are all of these different, propaganda pieces that are really, I think, having an impact on how people think about like what they're consuming and what it might do to them. And this is where you get your first big butter lobby. So the National Association for the Prevention of the Adulteration of Butter comes out in 1882.
NAPAB for short? NAPAB.
I had no idea there was such a thing. And the
1882, you said? Yeah.
1882. This is mad early. But they're lobbying for butter hard, and they're really pushing. Really, for them, it's about purity. It's like, how do we guarantee the purity of butter? How do we maintain the dairy's stronghold over this industry? And when you think about margarine, it's kind of impossible to maintain purity because it does have all of these different substances in it. None of it which will kill you, but right. But at the same time, I think, especially today, like the consumer wants an organic, local, grass-fed, butter. And they're pushing that aesthetic.
I will say it does make me a little nervous when big groups of white people start talking about purity. And this is happening like
in 1882.
In the 1880s. This happens actually with milk around the turn of the century too. Really pushing for milk as sort of nature's perfect food, which is also done by the dairy lobby. But also, there's something very familiar about this idea that industrial food, which is the image that you get from those political cartoons, right? The stuff of urbanity and factories is going to fall into your margarine. That feels
it's a hot dog butter.
Familiar. Yes, exactly.
But NIki, you mentioned, right, so we're in the last decade or two of the 19th century here. You mentioned, NIki, the jungle, Upton Sinclair's book. That was like a decade or two later, and really the high watermark of progressive era, sounding the alarm about kind of industrialization and factories and conditions within those. But I guess all of this shows that there is like an anxiety about industrialization in this moment. And I think especially when that intersects with like food and sort of health and things you're putting into your body, you can see that. But I don't know. It complicates an interesting story about kind of like the embrace of industrialization in this era.
But also how like these industries are starting to have legal action sort of taken against them. I mean, the lobbying group, this National Association for the Prevention of Adulteration of Butter, they're not just putting out propaganda to make margarine look bad. They're also actively trying to pass legislation that will stop margarine from even existing. So Wisconsin in 1881, Wisconsin is the first state to pass an anti-margarine law. And a lot of other states follow suit, like Michigan, Maine, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Ohio. And of course you think Wisconsin because, you know, they're big, dairy, cheese. That's their, that's their thing. But Pennsylvania passes a law in 1885 that just says no person, form, or corporate body shall manufacture out of any oleaginous. I don't know how to say that. Oleaginous. Say that 3 times fast. Substance or a compound of the same, other than unadulterated milk or cream, you know. And this becomes a really big deal. Like, how do you sell your margarine when it's illegal?
Yeah, that creates an enormous problem. And
black market for margarine.
Like, this is essentially like a more aggressive form of a tariff, right? Like we're not going to allow into our state this product that competes with one of our major industries.
No surprise, it's always an element, but certainly in this era, there's almost a kind of like puritanical skim on this. And so Minnesota Governor Lucius Hubbard talks about the ingenuity of depraved human genius being put to misuse with the production of oleomargarine and its kindred abominations.
I
love it.
Love it. Depraved human genius made margarine.
Know, it's really complex.
I've got some great news from one of our fellow Radiotopia shows. Ear Hustle, the show about daily life inside prison, is wrapping up an incredible season that took us from the true crime story of a bank robber named Sparkplug to the do's and don'ts of getting your haircut in prison. But Ear Hustle is not resting on their laurels. They are now gearing up for something new and exciting, an all-new 11-city tour. You can join hosts Nigel and Erlon along with special guests and performers. They're kicking off things in Nashville on August 4th. They're hitting Atlanta, Durham, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Cincinnati, 11 different cities, wrapping up in Austin on August 21st. I have seen the Ear Hustle team in action during a live show before. It is a really special, joyous, interactive occasion. And check this out. If you are a This Day fan and you're going to a live show, let us know. Maybe we'll try and connect you with some other fans who are going to be in the house in your city. You can check out all the details at earhustlesq.com/tour. Once again, that's earhustlesq.com/tour. Tariffs, meme coins, Girl Scout cookies. What do these all have in common? Come on, folks. It's all about the money. Economics is everywhere and everything. It's fueling our lives, even where we least expect it. And look, if you listen to This Day, that means I know that you are interested in context and the hidden stories that help explain our world. So I recommend to you that you listen to Planet Money from NPR. The Planet Money is a different kind of world where the complex economy actually makes sense. Human stories instead of abstract theories. It is econ brought down to earth. For me, going all the way back to 2008 and the giant pool of money, where Planet Money first helped me understand the financial crisis, I have relied on this show. It is accessible, it is fun, it's surprising. It's one of those shows that when you listen to it, you kind of think to yourself, why isn't this the only show that I listen to? Another great thing I'll tell you about Planet Money, they are absolute pioneers in the shorter podcast. It's about 30 minutes. You'll learn a lot. You get in, get out, nice and accessible. So it's time to check it out. Tune in to Planet Money every week for entertaining stories and insights about how money shapes our world. These are stories that cannot be found anywhere else. Listen now to Planet Money from NPR. So here's something that happens every year as it gets warmer. I put away my winter clothes, I take a look at my closet, and I think to myself, man, my rotation is pretty worn out. Same polos, same shorts, same lightweight pants as last year. So I have to buy a bunch of items to feel like I'm ready to embrace summer. Now, let me tell you about something that doesn't happen every year. me getting compliments on the summer clothes that I purchased. But I am here to tell you, listener, that it has been happening ever since I refreshed my wardrobe with some items from Quince. Just last week on a taping of this show, Kellie said, "That's a really nice polo shirt." It is, and it's actually called a cotton silk polo sweater. It's got a nice little white trim, some great texture to the material. I've got these linen pants that are getting some compliments. They cost under $50, by the way. Same with the chore jacket I got. A friend of mine at the bar the other day reached over and did that little, "Ooh, this is nice" thing and felt the fabric. Listeners, this could be you. Quince's pieces are easy, elevated, and somehow make you feel more put together without even trying. Treat your closet to a little summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thisday for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. Look, there's laws to ban it. There are huge taxes placed on it. And then there are some kind of even more absurd efforts. So we should talk here about the pink laws. So in the 1880s, Vermont, New Hampshire, South Dakota, all passed laws to force margarine sold in their states to be dyed pink. And the thought there is just, we're going to make this so distasteful to consumers that we're going to crush this industry. But can you imagine
if they had Instagram, man, this would have taken off.
Yeah, margarine would take
I actually like the idea of pink butter, like pink margarine. I'd be like, ooh, that's kind of cute. I'm thinking garden parties, pink margarine, pink butter,
like a high tea. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe because I've had different kinds of like cinnamon butters and things like that. I'm like, ooh, that could be fun. That could be like a rose butter. But no, that's beside the point. But at
the time, though, like it's seen as like unnatural.
Yes.
Totally.
And not just pink either, but there were petitions for other colors too, like black or,
Black's rough.
Black.
Yeah. I'm not doing black butter.
It looks like Marmite, I guess. But yeah.
Exactly.
New Hampshire Senator Henry Blair says, you can have all the other colors of the rainbow. Addressing, I think, margarine in person here. You may take all of the other colors of the rainbow, but let butter have its preempted hue. So, that yellowish color was for butter only, according to a few states that had passed these laws. Okay, so let's talk about how this gets to the Supreme Court. The thing that comes to the Supreme Court is actually a tax. There's a 2-cent tax on every pound of margarine passed nationally in 1886. And it's surrounded by all this, propaganda and rhetoric about how margarine was unnatural and industrial while butter was pure and beautiful. House Representative David Henderson of Iowa says, "You will find butter in the Bible from Genesis to Revelations."
No margarine in the Bible.
Control F for margarine,
butter is
folks.
biblical.
Yeah, that's right. The devil's spread, as they call
daily
it.
bread with butter.
And you can. This comes to the Supreme Court, and it fits right in with that Lochner era court that we've talked about before, which is all freedom of contract. We support business, and in this case, they're supporting no regulation on the margarine business. Which, you have to have a good reason to ban margarine. It can't just be that it's a competitor. You've got to come up with a good health reason. And even though they had all this propaganda, they couldn't really prove that it caused insanity.
Yeah.
Which is a problem.
Or cancer.
Yeah. So the tax gets knocked down. That does not end the fight. These fights continue for decades. The butter lobby does manage to kind of pass laws about the coloring of margarine, and that lasts for a while. So it couldn't be... I think margarine is naturally whitish, and so it couldn't be dyed yellow to look like butter. In the 1900s, they passed an amendment they try and add another 10-cent tax to any margarine sold in anything that wasn't white or pink. Customs officials have to gauge the yellowness of margarine. I mean, just all this crazy regulation just starts to fall.
But what's cool is, of course, industry finds a way. So margarine manufacturers start to sell their margarine with these little yellow packs of dye, which were often referred to as yolks. And then when people would get their white margarine, they would take it home and they would massage in this yellow dye to make it the color of butter.
That cannot be a recipe for anything.
I mean, if your whole project is to kind of run away from the allegations of artificialness, to include a little self-dyeing kit at home feels a little...
This is a larger question about food consumption and color. Why are we so obsessed with the color of our food? I think about like when the vegan craze, when they were trying to make like meatless burgers and they put beets in it to make it red so that you still had like that pink fleshy like color. And I'm just like, if you're a vegan, do you want red meat? I mean, like, I don't know why our color fixation matters so much.
I think it's deep in our brains. Like evolutionarily,
we eat with our eyes first,
as they say.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's sort of cruise through the 20th century here. It feels like into the 40s, into the 50s, margarine starts to really have a moment. I'm sure part of this is a larger economic story of the United States coming out of the Depression, but also I think a greater embrace of innovation and stuff that feels like it has that kind of better living through chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that like science makes things better is very much the U.S. ethos of the 1950s. And so this idea that we've just made a better butter becomes really popular. And it also gets better PR. So Eleanor Roosevelt films a commercial about the margarine that she likes. It's called Good Luck Margarine. And she's like one of the most popular women in the United States when she cuts this commercial. I also think it matters that they switched over to vegetable oils. Like that it became something that was vegetarian in an era when everyone was using Crisco feels important. That was a big move to move into those vegetarian large substitutes.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about the ignominious margarine taste test of the 1955 Wisconsin senatorial race? Okay, Nikki, what do you...
I absolutely love this because there's this taste test in 1955 in which all of the senators in Wisconsin, I assume these are state senators, had to sit down blindfolded and do a taste test to decide what was margarine and what was butter. And all of the good Wisconsinites could obviously tell the difference. I mean, they'd been raised from the baby bottle with butter on their lips, but one of them gets it wrong. A very pro-butter senator named Gordon Roselip, amazing name. And he tasted the margarine and he was like, this is butter. I know butter. I've been eating butter my entire life. This is butter. And he gets it wrong, which A, deeply embarrassing.
For a Wisconsinite,
right?
Yeah.
And B, the reason he got it wrong is because his wife, who had been worried about his heart, we'll get back to heart health later, but who was worried about his heart, had been substituting margarine for his butter for years. So he thought he was eating
like,
butter.
This is what butter tastes like?
Right. Isn't that wild?
Like, this is what my wife gave me. I know. It's butter.
That's amazing.
So great.
Oh, sure, honey.
I mean, but that taps into, I believe, that was effectively the explicit advertising argument by I can't believe it's not butter, right? It was basically like, in the 1970s and into the 80s, if you remember those ads, I think it was basically like, hey, housewives of America, you can trick your husbands and your family and sneak margarine into them and they will never know that it's not butter. But,
yeah, that tagline, I can't believe it's not butter, is like seared into my brain. I mean, this is why we were talking about being margarine kids. Like, that is all I know.
And there's something really important about that story because it was a healthy substitute. This idea that it wasn't animal fat really had a hold on people. And I think, this was, again, part of my growing up too. The idea that it was like scientific meant that it was healthier. You could manipulate it so that it was lower in fat or lower in calories, whatever the obsession was at the time. And that was one of the big selling points, which I think has changed.
Which is huge. Yeah, we've taken a complete 180 because now anything that you say is sort of like GMO or has been like somehow scientifically modified. It's like, I don't want anything that's made in a lab.
Yeah. So where would you pin the high water mark for margarine? It's got to be 70s into the 80s, maybe into the early 90s.
I think into the 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
And it fits into, I think, some of the health consciousness of this. But it remains, Wisconsin really is the sort of battleground for all of this. I mean, it remains illegal. Even to today, there are regulations in Wisconsin that prohibit restaurants from serving margarine unless it is specifically requested by a patron. And if you put margarine out, you could be fined $500 and on paper, at least 3 months in county jail. Can you imagine sitting in jail in Wisconsin and be like, what are you in for? Oh, I put margarine out at my diner.
Yeah. You'd get beaten up.
Yeah, I guess you would get beaten up.
Yeah. That's crazy. Can we talk about Mary McLeod Bethune? Because I think that's so fascinating too. So Mary McLeod Bethune basically says that these anti-margarine laws are racist. That not only does it prevent Black people from buying like a cheaper product, but a lot of Black farmers actually use their products, their cottonseed oil, to be a major ingredient in margarine. And so not only are you charging them more for butter, but you're cutting them out of the butter market or the margarine market. And so that when we think about these things, it's not just about taste. It's also about access. It's also about who gets to participate in these products and selling these products.
I have to say, this was not a story where I expected to encounter both Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune, but here we are.
Yes, and that makes sense because they were good friends, and I feel like they would have been like in solidarity. Like Eleanor would have been like, "So what are you eating?"
That's right. They had a meeting, a tea one day where they both whipped out the margarine.
Yeah, I mean, Eleanor Roosevelt's like my fave, but she's such a champion of like civil rights and social issues that it makes sense that this would be something that they would talk about.
And it makes sense that just when you have a product that is like eaten every day by basically every American, like it's going to be contested territory and glom onto, and all sorts of ideas will glom onto it and fights will glom onto it. All right. So I think the tide does start to turn. I mean, we've all seen it in the last 15, 20 years. A big part of it is, I think, health. You know, I think the anti-trans fat conversation raised some questions basically about like oil-based products. There's just an overall kind of pushback towards quote-unquote natural ingredients. There's also, though, I think a like really interesting element here of just like how every battle is kind of a cultural battle. And it just feels like health and culture and wellness are all tied up in the same way. Jacob, a researcher, points out that like we've had debates about cars and energy consumption and light bulbs and marijuana that all feel like just a mix of cultural battle lines and sort of facts. And so it's just this really interesting mix that we're in right now, emulsification that we're in right now of all the different kinds of
Can I tell you something that's like, I feel like I got to bring up Oprah, but like, I vividly remember watching an Oprah episode in which Dr. Oz was on and he was pushing butter hard. And he was like, butter is actually better for you because your body can naturally break down butter as opposed to these other, fats and things of that nature. And I remember like, okay, maybe I go back to butter. And thinking about it as a I don't know, an alternative. Take what you will with that. It's Dr. Oz. You know what I mean? But,
well, I mean, where we can take it is that Dr. Oz is now part of the MAHA movement within the government to make America healthy again. And when you talk about the culture wars around this, the politics around organics and around health-coded foods and crunchy people in foods, crunchy culture. I mean, those have been mixed lines since at least the 60s and 70s. You're seeing those come together in unusual and interesting ways. And I think margarine is an interesting way to tell that story because it gets you into seed oils and all kinds of fun stuff.
Right. Yeah. All right. As we wrap up, a couple things. One, we should give a shout out to former Radiotopia friends, still friends of the show, Criminal, who did a really interesting episode kind of around the like satanic panic around margarine. But they have an episode called the Demon Spread, which sort of hinges on that kind of notion of margarine as this abomination. It's really fascinating. So go check out that episode of Criminal. The other thing I'll point out, we sort of maybe started on this a little bit, but like, butter is really tasty.
So good.
Yeah, it is.
I think we probably all had that moment where like it took me a while to realize like, why does some stuff in restaurants taste so good? And then the answer is almost always there's like 2.5 sticks of butter in this. Like how do they cook fish, this healthy thing, so well at restaurants? Oh, it's because they douse it in butter.
Yes.
Right? Why does this broccoli taste so good?
Yeah, exactly.
It's because it's a pound of butter. That's right.
Exactly.
Well, this was Paula Deen's claim to fame, speaking of culture wars.
Stick of butter.
Stick of butter. Makes everything better.
It's true. Well, it is true. It is true. All right. This was very fun, very fascinating. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
For years, we had a love affair. Then we found out the butter we loved had cholesterol. But now hearts are soaring once again as people are discovering the fresh butter taste of...
I can't believe it's not butter.
I Can't Believe It's Not Butter is the name of a new spread flavored with sweet cream buttermilk, so it really tastes like butter, but without the cholesterol to spoil the romance. I Can't Believe It's Not Butter.
I never thought it could be this good again.
I Can't Believe It's Not Butter, the taste you love without the cholesterol.
Radiotopia.